The Elixir scripts we've written in the last few videos mostly work. As long as I enter a valid number at this prompt, you see messages telling us we can't vote if you aren't old enough, or it says you can vote, and depending on your age, it'll tell you if you can run for elected office. However, we still have one problem. If I don't enter a valid number, for example, if I enter the word 20, we see an error and the script crashes. In this video, we'll modify the script to better handle invalid user input, and the way we'll do this is by using another control flow structure called the case expression. The case expression has a shape that's similar to the cond expression we looked at in the last video. Here's what I mean. The cond expression allows many different Boolean expressions here, and each of these Boolean expressions has a corresponding return value here. Now the case expression and the cond expression look somewhat similar at first glance. To create a case expression, you would use the case keyword, and then something goes here, which we'll talk about in a moment. Then you've got one or more expressions here, then you've got an arrow, followed by each case's return value. There's a key distinction between cond and case expressions, which is that cond expressions allow you to use Boolean expressions here, whereas with case, the expressions here aren't Boolean expressions. I'll tell you what kind of expression they are in a moment, but I'm going to see if you can guess first. But before you try and guess, let's talk about what goes here. In this spot here, you'll put any valid Elixir value or some expression that returns a value. So for example, you could put a number here, or a string here, or a tuple, or a variable, or a function call. Now I'm going to put a two-element tuple here, where the first element is the number 18, and the second element is a string with a new line. Okay, now I want you to think about what we've learned so far in this course, and I want you to try to guess what goes here. I'll give you a hint by asking the question, what's happening on this line right here? The name for what's happening here is the same thing that's happening here. Do you remember when we were going over pattern matching several videos back? I showed you a basic form of pattern matching where we use the match operator with various data types, and I hinted that we'll be using pattern matching in a more interesting way later in the course. Well, it's later, and this is another more interesting way of doing pattern matching. But as a side note, there's an even more interesting way to do pattern matching, which we'll get to a bit later. These expressions here are similar to what we were doing earlier in the course on the left-hand side of the match operator. So for example, we could replace this with something like a two-element tuple, and we could replace this with another slightly different two-element tuple, or any other valid data type. Now, this example only has 3 pattern matching expressions, but you can add as many as you need. Now, just like the cond expression, each of these expressions is evaluated from top to bottom. So if this value's data type is matched against this value's data type, and if any assertions made here are valid, then this value over here is returned. If this value doesn't match this pattern, then the next pattern is checked, and so on. Another important thing to know is that if none of these clauses offer a match with this value, an error is raised. Okay, let's change the script we've been working on over the last few videos to use the case expression. I'll comment out the cond expression, and we'll rewrite it using the case expression. So I'll key message, and I'll bind it to the value returned by the case expression. But what should we put here? What if we moved this function call here, right here? In other words, what if the value we match against is the value returned by calling the integer module's parse function? Let's do that. Now remember, calling integer.parse will return 2 possible data types. If the function is successful, it'll return a two-element tuple where the first element is the number and the second element is anything that came after the number. If, however, the function call is unsuccessful, an error atom is returned. So let's start by making this clause match a two-element tuple But what should we put here and here? We could put a literal value here, like 17, and maybe use the underscore here, because we really don't care about any values found after the number. Then after the arrow, we could return the string, "You can't vote yet." Do you think we're headed down the right path? Well, this works if the user enters 17, but what if they enter 16 or 15 or any other number that's under 18? If we followed the pattern we started here, we'd need to add clauses for every possible number. So yeah, this pattern we've started isn't going to work well. But there is a better option. Let me show you. Instead of matching a literal value, we can instead put a variable here, which will bind to the value in the first element of the tuple. Then after the tuple, we can use what's called a guard. The way you create a guard in case expressions is by keying the when keyword and then adding a Boolean expression here. So I'll say when the age is less than 18, return the string, "You can't vote yet." Let's create another clause on the next line that's pretty much the same thing as the previous line, except in this case, we'll say when the age is less than 25, return the string, "You can vote." Now let's create another clause on the next line that's pretty similar to the other clauses, but in this case, we don't need to add a guard. This clause will match any two-element tuple where the age is 25 or older, and will return the string, "You can vote," and you can run for office. Okay, does this line look okay to you? There's a minor problem here, but we'll come back to it in a moment. So, these three lines should handle all scenarios where an actual number is entered by the user, but what about the error scenario? In other words, how do we want to deal with parse errors? Well, when parsing fails, an error atom is returned, so we can just add a literal error atom here, and then after the arrow, we'll return the string invalid number. All right, let's try this out. Well, we see a warning here. It's saying we've got an unused variable on this line number. Let's go check that line out. Okay, what the compiler is complaining about is the fact that we're binding the age variable to the first element of the tuple, but we never actually use the age variable. Usually, when you create a variable and you don't use it, it's a mistake. Doesn't necessarily mean there's a bug, but it is suspect. We could get rid of this warning by replacing age with an underscore. Actually, what if we just replace this entire pattern matching expression here with an underscore? Would this work? This is sort of a trick question. If you're only considering this line, you might think it would work, but let me draw your attention to this line, which is pattern matching on the error atom. It's important to keep in mind, pattern matching happens from top to bottom, and the first match found short circuits any further pattern matching. So if we had an underscore here, which again matches any value, well, when parsing resulted in an error, the error would be matched on this line, and it would display the wrong message, so this won't work. Okay, so we could just match on the two-element tuple, then we could use the underscore in both elements, but I'm going to show you another option. Instead of just using an underscore, we could prefix a variable name, like age, with an underscore. Often this is the preferred solution. Do you have any thoughts on why this would be preferred? Well, effectively it does the same thing as just using an underscore by itself, but it's more descriptive and a bit more meaningful to the reader. By the way, there are other ways we could write a valid match for this line, but we'll look at that a bit later. Let's try running this Elixir script and see what happens. Okay, the warning's gone, so that's good. I'll go ahead and enter 17, and that works. Now 18, and that works also. Now 25, and this works as well. Now let's try it with an invalid input. Okay, that was a bit more graceful than the last time. We actually see a helpful message. Cool. In the next video, I'll cover one other control flow structure, just briefly, and we'll talk about control flow structures in a more general way.